That was the other thing that I always felt like that's crucial when you're buying real estate. Like I like buying by the college because that college is never going away. So I
Yes.
know the value of those homes just keep going up because that college is right there. So the demand and the movement is always there.
Always there.
And like,
Yeah.
in Colorado Springs, there's those bases. They're really valuable. Why? Because there's movement. There's not
Yes.
forced movement, but semi-forced movement where people are, just every 2-3 years, you're going to see people coming and going, and you'll have a solid base of renters to choose from. I've got dreams, I've got dreams, I've got dreams to find a way out. I've got dreams, I've got dreams, I've got dreams to find a way out.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Real Estate Junkie Podcast. I'm thrilled to have Dustin Sidwell with us today. Dustin is a mortgage banking expert and branch manager at Intercap Lending in Colorado Springs. Like me, he's a bit of a real estate junkie, so I thought it'd be great to have him on the show. In this episode, we're going to explore Dustin's journey, delve into his personal investment strategies, get insights on the direction of the market, and gather his advice for anyone looking to get into real estate. So with that being said, let's get started. Welcome to the show, Dustin. Glad you're here, brother.
Keith, Andrew, it's always a pleasure, man.
Yeah, man. Just so you know, I just want to set this, right off the top. I'm still learning how to steer this whole thing, and there's going to be a few bumps. So make sure you have something to hold on to. Seriously. On the last episode, I didn't realize it, but my lighting was I have this light in front of my screen, and I had it just blasting, and I didn't realize, I couldn't tell from my view that it was just my forehead was just like this glowing bulb, and you could barely see my face. So poor Jason is probably still seeing bright patches from the episode. So just hang in there, okay?
I'm hanging on. I got some good handles right here on my chair.
All right, good. So to kick things off, how did we first meet? Was it back in I think 2018 or 2019?
Yeah, so you got referred to me. You were looking for some investment properties in Colorado. You were in California at the time.
I was
And
in
so you
California.
and I kind
Yeah.
of worked together. We did a couple deals. I'm trying to think, 2-3 deals together. You referred a couple of people over even before, real estate was a full-time thing. And I think we built a real good relationship. You and I just kind of hit it off right from the beginning.
Yeah, we did, and that's why, we've had many conversations over the years, which, honestly, I wish we could have recorded them because they'd be great content for this podcast. But I was still learning, when I first bumped into you and we did the first couple. I think I was on my second or third property, actually. So I was just really getting started in the game. But yeah, we bounced off ideas and strategies, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show, is to talk about your journey, and get it actually out there, because I think there's some valuable stuff that we can help a lot of people with.
I joke that I'm the son of a realtor and a mortgage lender. So my dad's a real estate agent. My mom was a mortgage lender. So I feel like back in the days when you didn't have anything to occupy you other than looking out the window, I'd listen to their conversations. My dad had the big brick cell phone, and we were trained to just be super quiet in the car if he was on the phone. But I listened to him negotiate a lot of deals. He'd persuade us to, with treats or milkshakes or whatever, to go, hey, real quick, I got to swing by a house, I get a signature. Sometimes I'd sit in the car and then I'd realize those were long appointments sometimes, but yeah, just was involved. I remember going in with my dad to open houses as a little kid, and kind of came back. I graduated, college, and kind of was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and kind of a different path. And then at one point, kind of always looked at my dad and my mom and kind of valued just the flexibility of schedule. That I knew there was good income opportunities. I knew kind of how the business works. So in 2010, when like everybody was getting out of mortgages, I was like, this is a perfect time for me to get in. Built some really good relationships at that point, and just I think quickly kind of built a good business model just because of all those times listening to my dad and mom. It was helpful, and I understood it, and I was able to kind of gain quickly. So did well myself, kind of built a little team, then started, building a branch out. And so, kind of worked up those legs, as far as the mortgage world goes. So, but it was funny because I've always thought the one thing about our job, Keith, is you get a commission check and then you're unemployed. You got to go find another deal. You got to go find another deal. You got to go find another deal.
Yeah. You're chasing. You're always chasing.
You're always chasing. And I remember like sometimes people were like, hey, wow, you did really, really well last year. Hey, that was a good year. But you're like, well, January 1, I started 0, and I just always remember feeling like, in some ways you envy those guys that have those solid salaries, I guess, but we don't want their, the commitments of the job or whatever. So we love all that, but I was always looking for, just ways that I wasn't starting at 0, I guess. And I do remember one day talking to my financial planner, and I've been pretty good about investing in 401ks and Roth IRAs and, everything since I was pretty young. And so one day I think he was trying to like motivate me, but he's like, hey man, when you're like 90, you're going to have like X amount. I don't remember what the number was, but it like depressed me. Cause I was like, that just feels like I gotta wait till I'm 90. I gotta wait till I'm 62 before you can touch any of that. And it just kind of made me realize, okay, I need to rethink my structure. So probably 6, 7, maybe 7 years ago, I had a realtor partner that I worked with. And I remember he called me and just said, dude, I got this rental property. I don't know. Do you know anybody that would be interested? And I was like, well, tell me about it. And he's telling me, hey, this down by UCCS, which is near Colorado Springs, it's one of the main colleges in Colorado Springs. And they're renting it to students. And here's the cash flow. So he tells me the cash flow, and I like quickly run, what the mortgage would be. And I was like, send those like rent schedules over to me. So he sends them to me, and I was like, me. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah. Oh, I'm taking that deal. Like, I'm interested. And so got in that one, and just they cash flowed really, really well. You're renting the rooms. You're kind of competing against the dorms. So the dorms, they're charging $600, $700, $800 a room. You're sometimes, don't have your own bathroom. There's all, you're sharing a kind of a kitchen setup. And here we were kind of telling kids, hey, $500, $600 a room. You have a backyard, you might have a garage, you have your kitchen, you're with your, 5 closest friends. So anyway, I kind of caught the vision of it, and then went from there and ended up getting 6, student rentals. And that's kind of been where I've chosen to invest a little bit of our funds.
Wow. So you have 6 student rentals now, and each one of those are they all single family homes that have just been, with 5 bedrooms, 4 or 5 bedrooms, something like that?
Yep. And all of ours have 5 bedrooms. And so, in some ways I feel like when people talk about doors, some days I'm like, hey, could I say I have 30 doors? Sometimes it feels like that just because you are renting individually. We do have 2 of our homes that we've converted to like whole house leases, where it's like we rent to one of the students, and then they're kind of our person that we talk to. So there's, you like anything, you morph it and tweak it, and if the circumstances allow you, you improve on it. So
you said about 3 or 4 years ago you bought your first one, and now you have 6.
Mm-hmm. So the first one came, that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I'm trying to think. And that one went well. And then we were kind of a little ahead of the curve. And so we would watch that market. It's like it's probably like 5, 6, 7 neighborhoods that we were just watching, that we were just targeting. And then we had a second one come up. So we picked that one up. And then there was a guy that was getting out of them, and he was going to sell all 3 at the same time. So I took all 3 at the same time. And then I had a VRBO near Keystone, Colorado, and I was like moving some money. So I ended up getting a 6th one. And you talk about regrets. It's funny because I kind of think like every one of those was like one of my kids, you know? And so people are like, why don't you have 20 rentals? And I was like, well, because every one of them takes so much brain damage, right? I mean, whether you admit it or not. And so at the time, six just felt like as much as I wanted to kind of like juggle. But if I was to think back, do I wish I would have invested in 20? Sure. You know, and there was a little window when I think you could have. I mean, they were selling just, you know, between 250 and 350 back then. I mean, on day one, you would be probably netting 1,000 to 1,500 cash flow a month. And there was just a small window. And then people started hearing about it. And next thing you know, the prices shot up. And so it's a harder, but it's just the way that things go, you know. And it's, I mean, that's something I know we're going to get into, like on today's, you know, today's market. Um, it's very reminiscent. There's opportunities everywhere. You just have to see them and you have to act because they're not opportunities forever, and the opportunity is constantly changing.
Yeah. Well, how is the turnover though on those things? I mean, especially on the ones where each room is an individual lease. It seems like a lot of work to me. Are you managing all those yourself?
So we've used a property manager for most of it. We're kind of in the realm right now where we're managing it ourselves, but we're kind of building out a little property management arm, you know, and we're looking to manage some of them on our own. Um, I just feel like it's systems, and I feel like we can do a good job at it. So we're kind of in that transition. This has been our first year kind of managing it on our own. And just like mortgages or real estate or anything else, kind of that first year, it's probably a little more tedious. You're learning some lessons. You're building your structure. But I think as we continue to go, it's just going to keep getting easier for us. But yeah, I mean, there's a pro and a con to the college rentals. One, it's a seasonal thing, so everybody's kind of like moving out around the same time and they're moving in. The pro, in some cases, I mean, we have several sophomores and freshmen that we put in. So some of them, you know, you have for 3 4 years. You know, if you take good care of them, you know you'll put them in for the whole time. One of the things that we've done that I think is kind of unique is I've chosen to offer that we will go in and clean their common areas every month. So we send somebody in, we clean the kitchens, we clean the bathrooms with the idea, two reasons. One, we're in there every month, so we're seeing the properties. And this isn't me, but the person that, of course, cleans kind of reports on every house, like what the condition, how it's looking. But we've found that as these kids, as we're showing value to them, they're kind of showing value to us because they're realizing, like, hey, we're taking care of them. So it's kind of that giver's gain. We're giving a little bit of extra, but I think everyone wants their home space to be high quality, wants it to be nice. And so you've just noticed these kids are like taking good care of the houses, and they're saying that we're investing in, so that, you know, indirectly they're kind of investing back with us. So it's been nice.
Now, when you purchase one of these homes, are you furnishing it like after the purchase or?
So two of them, yeah, two of them came furnished. But one of the things that we found is like, again, like back in the day, like when I went to college, the common space was the main spot everyone hung out, right? I mean, now it's
Yeah.
like, hey, you got a big TV, you have a table, and it's like everyone goes to the rooms to sleep, but the common area was kind of where everyone hung out. What we've found is a lot of these kids, they do a lot of their stuff in their own room. I mean, they got their own, you know, whatever they watch on TV. They got their own big screen TV. They're very peculiar about their bed, you know, so they kind of do their own thing. So a couple houses came furnished, but usually they furnish in their, you know, they got their own stuff and they're real peculiar on what they want. So
Nice, nice. Okay. So that's awesome though. I think that there's so many loan originators, just like real estate agents that are out there that like I can't tell you how many agents that I've run into that don't even own the house that they live in. And here they are showing homes to potential buyers and they don't even own a piece of real estate themselves. So I think it's awesome that you actually use the loans that you know that you're selling or that you're offering other clients. I think that's really awesome. Practicing what you preach, eating your own dog food is is what you call it. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about the loan side of things. How have you financed all of these homes? Like are you what is your strategy there? What types of
um,
loans have you used to acquire these properties?
all of these, I mean, I've just used just regular, conventional investment properties, putting anywhere from 20 to 25% down, just to secure the greatest, interest rates that we can. Um, and I go back and I kind of look at it and I say, okay, it's funny that I'm in mortgages because I wouldn't say that like I love debt. I'm usually very debt averse, and I try to pay everything off. And so, we aggressively paid down some of the mortgages and recast, and just to increase those cash flows. But going back to your first point, I want to hit on this because I think you brought something up that I really like. I mean, I talk to a lot of people too that are in real estate and lending, and they don't see the power of real estate. And I'm like, really, it's a secret. And it's not even that big of a secret, but you're like, man, real estate, if you talk to anybody, and every house I've ever lived in as like a primary residence, when I go to sell it, I realize I lived there for free. And I was like, man, I live there. And then, at the end, you're getting all your money back, but that's not even maybe taking in the tax savings and everything else we've had this whole time, plus the pride of home ownership and being able to, do whatever you want with the house. I actually have someone right now that unexpectedly the landlord said, hey, I'm going to sell the house. And that the amount of pressure and stress that this has added on this family is immense because like within 2 weeks they're like, my son's a senior in high school, my wife just had surgery, and it's like, hey, well, I'm going to put a sign up on Monday, so good luck. And you can just see like that kind of thing of, oh, that's just a lot of pressure that these people have. But I remember going to, so Brian Buffini, he's a major real estate coach for a lot of realtors, and they're going to know who he is. And I remember going to a mastermind event in San Diego, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and him talking about wealth and him talking about the only way to really build wealth. Because he's like, hey, unless I'm like a professional basketball player, I'm never going to make enough money to be able to retire just off my income. And he's like, I got my commercial, rentals, I got my residential, I got my 401k, I got my, companies I've invested in. And every day we all go to work. And he's like, someday my real estate side does well. Some days my 401ks do well. Some days like I'm killing it at my job. But he's like, the thing is if we all go to work every day, all 9 or 10 or whatever you have going, just over time it tends to go up. And that's the thing about rentals is I look at it and I'm like, okay, we've seen rent appreciation, which is the part I probably didn't think about. Where I was like, hey, a couple of years ago we were renting it for this, and now we're renting it for this, like more than we were renting it for. But in a lot of those cases, our mortgages haven't really changed, so our payments haven't really changed, but our income's gone up. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I mean, again, tax write-offs and everything else. Third thing, you got someone paying down your mortgages for you. Fourth thing is appreciation. I mean, I've talked about like a lot of those properties have doubled in value, just in 5 or 6 years. So it's like energy. I can only do so many loans. You can only do so many real estate deals. You can only do so many. But when you start building this, I mean, is it passive? Not every day. There's some days, and you know this too.
Oh
It's
yeah.
anything but passive. It's
Yes.
very time intensive, and like I say, with the student rentals, around the end of July, it's very time intensive. But we have like one intense month, and then we kind of have 11 months that are like fairly easy. I say fairly because I'm knocking on wood just to like
Yeah.
make sure that way.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I know.
because most of your real estate is investments are in student housing, you're going to get hit harder than someone that's not in that at a certain time of the year. Like for me, if I have a dozen properties, maybe one or two of them every month is going to have some type of an issue that I'm dealing with. But the other ones that if I only own the one or two, then I'd be in trouble. But because I have the other ones, they make up for the losses and one or two of them. For you, you're having to deal with all these, everyone moving in and moving out at the same time. So that to me, and that's what kind of scared me away from student housing in the first place. I was like, man, I don't want to deal with that every year. Like, oh man, we got to fill up all these rooms, and it just seemed like on a logistics side, just a lot of work. But I mean, if you really look at it, 1 month, 2 months of work, the payoff is huge. And the other thing is your rents are going up every year, just like my rents are going up every year. So if they're paying $500 a room this year, most likely next year it's going to be 600, 700, 800. It's going to go up every year. So you're going to always be ahead of inflation with your rents. And then on top of that, the bonus, and this is the way I look at it. The bonus is the appreciation of the asset, right? So when I buy for cash flow. I don't even look at appreciation at all. That's something my kids are going to get to enjoy. But I don't want to, like, maybe I'll tap into it at some point to, purchase another property, something like that. But for the most part, I just want my tenants paying down my loan. So when I get out of this world, they're all paid off. And my kids have that. That's that generational wealth that I leave to them. But until then, I just live off the cash flow. And I know every year it's going to go up. Unlike if the money was just, sitting in a bank somewhere, like it's not even to keep up with inflation, or in the stock market where who knows what the market's going to do. I have that consistent monthly cash flow that pays the bills.
Well,
And
the
so
other part that I kind of brought up earlier is you can touch, you get that cash flow today. You don't have to wait till
exactly, I don't
retirement
have to
age.
wait till I retire. I don't have to wait till I'm 60 or whatever. I can start, and that's what ultimately led me to getting out of the rat race. Was I was like, you know what, I could live off this cash flow. Um, Although maybe, I'll have some tough months here and there and I'll need to figure that out. But for the most part, like it's only going to go up over time. And worst case scenario, I can always sell a house. Like at the end of the day, I can always sell a house. Something really bad happens. So I feel like real estate is definitely the most secure investment you can ever make.
Oh, I 100%. I mean, I tell this to people all the time because, we're talking to them about mortgages and there's a lot of insecurity. And it's like, man, this is the best thing you could be investing into.
It
And
is.
I can remember, and I think this is a good because I don't know who's going to be listening to this and like where they're at. Maybe they're like, man, I wish I could invest in real estate, but I just don't even know where to start. And I always go back to this one guy. And I mean, we probably closed 7 loans for him now. But what I loved about it is he calls me and he's like, hey, and I get a lot of these calls. Hey, I want to invest in real estate. And you're like, great. And how much do you have in your checking savings? And he's like, today? Yeah, today. Maybe like $1,000. And you're like, okay, well, we got some hoops we got to jump through. So with this guy, we just started talking. He was renting a house, and I remember telling him, I was like, hey, let's do CHAFA, which is like down payment assistance in Colorado. Let's do a CHAFA loan. Let's get you in your own house. And he's like, great. And this guy drove school buses, by the way. So I mean, he makes roughly, if I remember, like 40,000 a year. And so what he did is we got him into a house, put $1,000 down with Chaff. I got all his closing costs covered by the seller. He goes in, and I still remember he was like, I'm going to rent out my other rooms to other people. So he rents out, lives on a shoestring, very tight. Well, like 2 years later, he calls me and he's like, I don't know if you remember me, but I think I'm ready for my next house. And so we were like, okay. And he's like, I've saved up 3% this time. And so he used house hacking, right? So now all of a sudden he rents out the room he was in and he goes into this house, puts 3% down. I remember he gets in there and starts getting it going, does the same thing, rents out, he's a single guy, so he rents out all the other houses, rents out his basement, gets that going. Right about then, we saw like homes start to appreciate. So all of a sudden he went back to his first one, got a HELOC, pulled some money out, bought his third one and got that rolling. And now all of a sudden these cash flows, it was like he was saving up money faster because it was like he had his job, but all of a sudden he's like, man, I'm making like $2,000-3,000 a month extra. And the guy he didn't like go crazy yet. I mean, he was still focused on his goal, which was like every dollar, I'm saving it, I'm working it, I'm getting houses rented. I mean, he's up to 6, 7 properties now.
Yeah.
On a guy,
He became a real estate junkie. He's a
yeah.
house collector.
And you know what it started from? I mean, he started reading books. He started listening to podcasts. He was watching things on YouTube. And I remember when he called me, it was like, he knew enough, like he knew, but it was like his first call was like, where do I start? And I would say, Keith, one thing you're good at and one thing I think I'm decent at, and like one thing that's kind of important for like when you're working with a realtor, you're working for a lender, is you want a creative thinker. You want somebody that's not going to say, dude, you can't invest in real estate today. You don't have 20% down. I don't know what to do. But instead it's like, let's be creative. Like, what can we do? How can we make this work? I see you have the will. Now we just got to put the pieces together for you to get like where you want to be. So, and you've done that masterfully for like many of the clients we've worked for. You found them creative properties with instant cash flow. You've done a good job of like positioning them near bases. See, that was the other thing that I always felt like that's crucial when you're buying real estate. Like I like buying by the college because that college is never going away. So I
Yes.
know the value of those homes just keep going up because that college is right there. So the demand and the movement is always there.
Always there.
And like,
Yeah.
in Colorado Springs, there's those bases. They're really valuable. Why? Because there's movement. There's not
Yes.
forced movement, but semi-forced movement where people are, just every 2-3 years, you're going to see people coming and going, and you'll have a solid base of renters to choose from.
Exactly. Yeah. It's important to have a niche, right? And to
Mm-hmm.
perfect it. And you'll just get better and better at it too. So, yeah. And student housing is, again, you're right next to the university. It's not going away. You're going to have that constant flow of students coming and going. So you'll never have to worry about vacancies and all this. So yeah, that's excellent strategy. And yeah, it's amazing what one house can do for someone. Like you were describing, your client that came to you with that first one didn't have the money at the time, but you guys worked out, found a grant program. And let's talk more about that for someone that's just getting started. Because right now, rates are pretty high. Well, at least in people's minds, they're pretty high. Prices are high. So a lot of people I know are sitting on the fence going, yeah, I'm going to wait for rates to go down or home prices to drop. What do you say to those folks?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I say, it's funny because for years when the market was crazy, let's say during COVID, like everyone's coming to me and they're like, Dustin, I should have bought more real estate. Oh man, I wish I would have bought more real estate. And let me know when the market slows down because I'll invest in real estate. And so anyway, you reach out to those handful of people and I'm like, hey guys, this is a good time to buy. And they're like, well, the rates are high. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. That's, that's kind of the way the market. Well, it's like you go back to 2008, and I always say this, and it was like there was so much like uncertainty at that time, right? No one knew. No one knew how it was going to work out, and everyone felt like real estate for the small window was like the worst investment ever. And I always laugh because Warren Buffett, he always used this one liner, and I've loved it. He said he felt like a mosquito in a nudist colony. He was like, people were just giving real estate away, and I was just like, are you serious? Okay, okay. Because see, he's smart. He's non-emotional. He's making like rational, logical decisions. Like real estate's going to come back. It's going to bounce back. And he knew he could weather the storm until that came. So when I talk to people, sometimes I'm like, real estate is a long-term game. Like you can't play short. I mean, maybe if you're flipping, fixing and flipping properties, maybe it is short term, but for most of it, it's long term. And so I sit there and I'll throw an example. Okay, everyone loves the low rates because that's the way they were. But you got to remember during COVID, what was happening? We were like supply and demand. Demand was outpacing supply. So what was happening? Everyone was overbidding. And like, I remember it was brutal. Like, I would reach out to a listing agent. Hey, we just made an offer on one of your properties. And they'd say, we have 32 offers, 10 are cash. Your buyer has no chance. Great. Awesome. Thank you. And like, it was hard because these people get all excited on the Saturday. They spend 3 hours looking. They found the house. Boom, didn't get it. Next Saturday, they go find another one. They're all excited. Didn't get it. After like 7, 8 of these weeks, some of these people are discouraged because if they didn't have 40, 50, 60,000 over asking price, they just felt like I can't even compete. So again, what was the pro of that market? Low interest rates. What was the negative? Like no negotiating power. I mean, you would go in and you remember, did we ask for closing costs? No. Did we ask for inspection items? No. We had to close in like 2.5 weeks. The seller like dominated. And as a buyer, you were just like trying not to like make any waves. You were just trying to be like super good, close, and then like, thank you, I got into a house. But everyone thought that was amazing. Like somehow that was such a good market to buy because of the rates, but I was like, the terms were horrible in some ways. So now I look at it. I just helped a guy buy a home, and I'll just use this example. So the price was 760. He got it for 720. So I'm like, okay, you got 40,000 off the asking price. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, we've talked about it. Like there's still so much demand for real estate, and I'll get to that in a minute. But this guy particularly, he got it for 720. He got $10,000 in seller concessions, and he had all of his inspection items fixed. So I was like, okay, let's just say 40,000 off the ask price, 10,000 in seller concessions. And let's just say, I don't even know what his inspection items would value it, but let's say 5,000. Because they had some mold in the house and they went through and they took all the mold out. So I was like, let's just say that's $5,000. I have no idea. So we're like, okay, let's just say it's 55,000 that you just saved on day one. And so we went through and we figured out, and I was like, it's tough to say like what the interest rate, but let's just say you're paying $600 extra a month in your payment. Okay, so let's just say $6,000 a year, just for simplicity, just because it's an easy number to figure. So $6,000 a year, but I was like, how long is it going to take you before you paid 55,000 that you got on day one? And he's like, yeah, that is going to take a minute. And I was like, and here's the reality. I would say by the time that comes, there is no way that you will still be in the same interest rate you're in now. So the smartest thing that you can do, you get in and you got to think like Warren Buffett. Like you got to think in the long term. You can't just think today, like, dude, you can weather this storm. And then in a year and a half, we're going to refinance you into a good rate. Then you got the best of both worlds. You didn't way overpay for the house. You got your inspection items. You got your seller concessions done. And now you refinance into a good rate. And everything's one big cycle. And at one point, if you live there long enough, the rates will drop down to crazy low levels and you'll refinance and you'll be like, great. And then we'll start the rat race all over again.
Except I think this time, I mean, the rates went so low. It's hard to imagine that rates are going to go that low again. And I'm talking into the twos. I mean, it's possible, but it's probably not going to happen for a long time if it does.
100%.
So that being,
and it can't. I would tell you it can't go that low because you're going to see they kept rates too low too long. I mean, that's just the reality.
But here's the thing. By doing that, what they did is they created the same situation's going to happen. As soon as rates drop back into the fives, oh my gosh, everyone's going to be jumping in the market. But guess what? No one's going to be selling because they're sitting on 2-3% interest rates. Why are they going to sell their house? They're not. So those homes, most of them, are never going back into the market, which means inventory is going to be extremely tight, which means you're going to have 30 people bidding on the same property, driving up the price, and we're going to be back into the same situation. So it's like, yeah.
And I agree with you 100%. I think, and that was one of the things years ago. I remember someone saying that, like, man, people are never going to sell. Like 2.5%, it's like, that's free money, really, when you do the math. And like, if you are, writing off your interest and everything else on your taxes, it's like, I mean, that is so cheap. And so the one thing that I've seen, and again, talk to a lot of people, and I see this, and like, here's where they're at today. So last year, 2.5%, they're never going to move. And this year, they're like, I hate my kitchen, dude. I hate it. And that 2-car garage in the winter, I just hate it. And so I can feel them slowly starting to fade. And at some point, they're like, fine, I'll sell. So, but some people never will. But at some point, the house is too big. You don't need that house. And I do think there's a window. But see, what happens right now when rates are in the 7s and you're in the 2s, oh, it's just not even close. But if we get in the 4s, people are close enough. And then they'll start to move.
I also think that this is going to you're right, that they're just the regular buyer. This is their primary residence. At the end of the day, they're buying the house for the kitchen, right? So they see another house. Oh, this kitchen's so much nicer. I'm willing to pay more for it. Those buyers, yeah, they're going to sell. You're going to see some of them sell. But the investors, the ones that are sitting on the duplexes and fourplexes, and even the single family homes that are rental properties, why would they ever sell?
I have 2 thoughts there. And I'm just going to throw these out. I know this is recorded, but I'm just going to throw these are ideas that go around in my head. But the first thing, so you go back to our major problem is not interest rates, but really it is supply. We just, even in this high interest, and this is, I know we kind of touched on this, but really, so go back to simple economics, supply and demand, right? So when demand, or let's start with this. When supply is outpacing demand, which was 2008, everyone thinks the market's going to crash. And I was like, well, the problem with 2008 was there was way more supply than demand. If you go back, neighborhoods, foreclosures everywhere, and there just weren't that many people looking to buy. So it was just vacant homes. And I was like, that was Now I'm like, we have the total opposite problem. I mean, right now, like, and you could look and the numbers kind of shift. They're saying like we have a month and a half of inventory, which is so low. 6 months is considered like a balanced market. So, and that's with higher interest rates. So you sit here and you go, oh man, okay, so supply or demand is outpacing supply, which drives prices up. The only thing that's keeping a lot of people on the sidelines, and you talked about this in the beginning, was interest rates, right? And Black Knight, who does a lot of data, for real estate, they came out with a study that said they feel like every time interest rates drop by 1 percentage point, 1 million people enter the buying pool. So you sit here and you realize they got all these people on the sidelines, but like you said, if you get in the fives, all of a sudden, I mean, that could be 2 to 3 million people nationally that are getting into this buying pool. I don't think that we have the supply of homes to do it. They're saying we're between 4 to 5 million homes short nationally of demand. And so you see apartment complexes getting built everywhere. You see multi-family, homes being built everywhere. Just because it's like, so there's one solution that I've heard that would solve everything. And if someone out there knows someone really important, I swear this could solve all of our problems. It's the only solution that I've heard that will fix it quickly. But if we could do something where we started to like waive the capital gains taxes with investors and say, hey, because here's the thing about an investor that's nice. If they sell their home, it's a +1 transaction because they're not going to buy another one. Usually, let's say someone buys a primary or they sell a primary and buy a primary. It's a neutral transaction. Buy one, sell one, buy one, sell one. And investors actually hurt inventory because it's a negative one. They buy one, but they don't sell one. So they're pulling from like already a low supply. But if all of a sudden we had all these investors that were super motivated, that it was like, hey, for the next year, maybe we'll lower your capital gains taxes. And there's guys that are done playing the game. They're done, or they want to move their money to something else. Like they're like, hey, real
Yeah,
estate.
a different asset class.
Yeah, I want to do something else. And maybe I'm at a different point in my career where I'm like, I don't want to manage properties anymore. Yeah. And I think there would be a huge percentage. There's estimates that investors own around a third of all the real estate. So all of a sudden I'm like, man, would everybody do that? No. But would a huge chunk of people go, dude, I'm going to jump in on this and I'm going to capitalize on this? Yeah. And then all of a sudden that supply would go up and maybe get closer to meet and demand. And we could actually have the rates drop down to a decent number where we wouldn't be worried about the supply and demand, hitting off. So
I like that idea. That would definitely that would change things up for sure. Absolutely. I I
yeah.
mean, is there anyone talking about? Have you heard anyone bring that up?
No, but we need
It's just
someone.
your idea. You need to run for office.
I won't take credit for it, but I heard it and like instantly I was like, wow, that's the one idea I've heard. Because here's the problem that I mean, and this goes back again. I'm going to go back to that same Brian Buffini conference, and if you don't go, the guy's a stud, man. I love his podcast. He does a podcast. I go to his mastermind event almost every year. So he's. But I remember back in 2010 in Denver, going to this conference, and I still remember him saying, he's like, "We're going to have a lack of inventory," and the crowd laughed because at that point it was like we were flooded with inventory, and he just did the math, and he's like, "We're just not building enough homes." And so from like 2010, they started like slowing down building, slowing down building. And he's like, the problem is it takes so long to flip that switch. So once you realize you're behind, it's not like, sweet, let's go build. I mean, they just can't build that many homes. You got to develop it and you got to get it zoned and then you got to build them and then you got to sell them. And I mean, it just takes years and years and years, to kind of get there. So
Yeah.
I just thought, I don't know if we're going to build our way out of this, lack of inventory. I just don't know if it's possible unless something creative comes about. I've heard of like ways that guys are like, hey, we're going to do these units that are super quick to build. Some of that might come out, um, but I just thought that is one thing that would instantly, I think, solve a problem and maybe give us a little buffer to like let some building catch up in other areas.
Yeah. It's definitely an excellent idea. So, what can you tell me about, there's this new Fannie Mae program where you can put 5% down on up to a fourplex if it's going to be
Yeah.
your primary residence. What can you tell me about that program?
Yeah, this just goes back to like, I would say like opportunities are everywhere, right? So you always have to look at it and like, it's just like really savvy people are good at seeing opportunities and they jump on them. And so to me, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so I mean, I got to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head, but let's just say I'm pretty certain on a fourplex that you can buy up to $1 million, 5% down. And so I'm like, okay, you're telling me that I could put $50,000 down, get four doors. To me, that is like a game changer. Um, and I think what's going to happen is, again, I don't know, but it just makes a lot of sense that what just happened to those properties, they just went up in value because now a lot more people can buy them, and so all of a sudden, what happens when there's more demand? Because we've always said that like multifamily homes, they tend to get good cash flow, but like the appreciation is not quite as good. That's always kind of been the common thing that's said. But all of a sudden, I'm like, man, if you make it easier to buy these, the cash flow is going to maybe be even a little bit better because all of a sudden, yeah, but all of a sudden, there's way more buyer demand, which all of a sudden pushes the price up. So I think it's a phenomenal thing, and usually, and this has been a unique market, but I've always said that usually what happens is when like investors like pipelines get thinner, they get creative. You know, like um, I don't know, there was HARP loans clear back in like 2010. I remember that was back when like everybody was upside down. So they came out with this creative program that it didn't matter if you were owned by Fannie, Freddie, you could refinance it even if you're 125% loan to value. Like if you were way upside down. And so they created this program. All of a sudden, all of us got super busy. The one thing that's been weird about this market is as things have slowed down and like, it's almost felt like they haven't come out with anything that's really kind of opened the door to do a lot of crazy things. Like I would say if we could do something like a 4% cash out refinance right now, we would be as busy as we can be because we're showing that people's like credit card amounts are like highs they've ever been. People are sitting on tons of equity, but they just can't tap into it. So again, it's just finding those opportunities. So the first one that I feel like I've seen in a while is this 5% down multifamily, which I'm like, there you go. Like there's an opportunity. They've opened up a door. They've kind of given something where there's good opportunity to go there. Now I'm going to be honest, like you're going to get a rate that's saying you're like, oh man, this is in the eights, dude. Look what you're doing. If you can cash flow positive like right away on those other three units, and then we refinance you at some point. So it's just again seeing the opportunity. And one more plug for smart people. I have this one investor that I've done like 8 or 9 deals for. And during like COVID, he went totally quiet on me. Like I didn't hear from him hardly at all. And like, man, he's back and he's been talking to me and we're looking at properties. And the one thing that's interesting is he's like, I wish rates would go to 9%. And he said that back when they were like in the sixes. But he was like, I wish they'd go to 9. And I was like, why would you say that, man? He's like, because I'm like, competition's going away. And he's like, I don't care, man. I don't care if I have a 9% rate because I'm just going to refinance it at some point. I want a good buy. That's crucial to it being a good investment for me. And I can hang on for the short term. Anyway, a lot of stories, a lot of smart man. That's why he's doing well.
So thank you so much for sharing your real estate journey with us and your perspective on the market and everything else. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you, someone was interested in purchasing a property, where you're licensed in what, Colorado and Utah, right?
Yeah, Colorado and Utah. Um, my number, 719-321-7928. I always say, I mean, it's archaic as that is, it's the best way. I love getting in touch with people. I want to know your story. I want to know where you're at. And just kind of like going back to what we talked about clear at the beginning. Sometimes you think you know, but really what makes a good loan officer? We're good at jumping through hoops and putting puzzles together. I need to hear what you're looking to. You can ask me questions. Let's see if we can put the puzzles together and let's see if we can figure out a creative way to get you where you want to be. And then, of course, email dustin.sidwell@intercaplending.com works as well. So
Awesome, awesome. And so how many people do you have working with you on your team?
So I have three, yeah, currently that work on my team. So I've got a couple, loan officer assistants, and then I call her the chaos coordinator. She's the one that making sure all of our appraisals are on, and deadlines are being covered. And she's actually out of town today, so it's funny you notice all the things they do when when they go out of town.
Yeah.
So,
Well, one thing I will say that I really and why I've referred so many people to you in the past is just uh, a lot of these loan originators and officers that I've worked with in the past, they go quiet on you. You need something right away. I need a pre-approval. I'm putting an offer and I need it right now. And I need them to be available too. If the seller wants to, the seller's agent wants to call and verify anything, I need to know that they're responsive. And that's one thing I'll say is you and your team have been incredibly responsive always. So that's why I definitely, you guys are my go-to here in the Springs. Anyone's buying in this area, I'm like, hey, call Dustin. He's your man. He's going to stay on top of things.
it means a lot, man. I mean, I just feel like it's systems, and it's, for us, we try to call every Tuesday, try to call everybody in the transaction. Every Friday, we send an email, and it just found that, like, when you buy a house, Keith, you and I forget, right? But then when we go buy a house, you realize how stressful it is. You're like, oh my God, this is so stressful. I got so much. And so it's a good reminder for me, like, okay, we do this every day. They don't. But it's like if you're giving them a call on Tuesdays and you're telling them, hey, I call you every Tuesday, you get an email every Friday, but you can call me anytime. I feel like they hardly need to call just because if you're doing a good job and they're like, okay, the next steps, what's coming up. And then, the process is going clean. It's just a lot easier. So,
yeah. Wow. Well, hey, I really appreciate the time that you put into this today. As we wrap up, do you have any advice or tips you'd like to give listeners on real estate or mortgage financing or anything like that? Any last words of advice?
I'd probably say the one thing that I think a lot about, and I think about this in my own life too, but, a lot of people come to me right now and they're like, you know what I should have done? I should have bought all this real estate. Oh man, I wished I would have done this and that. And, like, you're right. You're right. But, the best time to plant a tree, 20 years ago. The next best time, today. And I just like, because it's one big cycle. I mean, I remember talking to my grandparents, and I remember they said they bought a home for 100,000, and it was the biggest home, and the payment was huge, and you're like 100,000, and our kids are all going to be buying homes in the multiple millions. I mean, it's just the way it's going to be.
It's hard to fathom, even on the rent side. I tell people this all the time. I'm like, that $2,000 a month rent payment that you're paying right now, I guarantee in 20 years is going to be $4,000 a month. I guarantee it. And they're like, no way. It's
Maybe
never going
even
to be
shorter than
2,000.
that. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know. Same thing with the price of the homes. Like, you buy something right now, let's say you spent $500,000 for it. And let's just say the market just went crazy and it went down and now it's worth $400,000 2 years later. I guarantee if you wait long enough, 10, 15 years, it's going to be double. It happens every time. I have a graph that I put together that I looked at the last 100 years in real estate here in Colorado Springs. And I mean, it's just like this. Yeah, there's a few dips and a few peaks, but then it just keeps going up. It keeps going up over time. So all you have to do, it's a weight game. Like you said, it's a long-term investment strategy. And the best thing is if you're on the rental side of things, if you're investing in rental properties, is if you're living off that cash flow or you're just looking at the cash flow, as long as you have someone paying more than your mortgage, you're ahead. That long-term appreciation is riding in the background. So that's your icing on the cake. And actually, in the end, it becomes your cake.
Well, and one last thing too, and I've talked to a lot of people, and everyone used to think retiring was their goal. Oh, I want to retire. I mean, we all have seen people retire; they're bored out of their minds. But really, the goal is selectively working. And if you can get to a point where you have that passive income stream, you become more selective in the deals you take, and like you value your time and your energy, and maybe you can put your family in a higher priority than maybe they've been. But if you're in the grind and you're barely hanging on, I mean, you don't own your life, man. Someone else owns you. So it's just a way. Real estate is a very good tool to get you into a point where those passive income streams, and like you said, I love that idea. It's like, man, heaven forbid life gets difficult. You can access, a big chunk of change and just sell a rental property. And it's like you would have instant, chunk of change that you have access to. And now again, we don't want to do that, right? You want to hang on as long as you can, but you could. And so that helps you sleep a little better knowing that if something kind of crazy threw you for a loop, that you could probably weather it. So
Yeah, you definitely could. You definitely could. Well, hey man, it's been great. I really appreciate the time once again. And yeah, thank you.
okay, now I appreciate you, Keith. You're the man. Let's talk soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Real Estate Junkie Podcast. If you found value in today's discussion, please do share it, subscribe to us, and stay tuned for more insightful episodes. Until next time, keep investing smart and living well. God bless.